This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohn of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Episode 184 of the Detroit Sports Podcast is now available. You're listening to the Doc and Jock program. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz?
What an interesting, sad weekend it was in sports. And it leaves us with a whole bunch to talk about this week because it just seems like once we finish our podcast, news just breaks left and right. And it leaves us with a ton of stories to get to the following week. And this weekend was no exception. Started off horribly Friday night with the sudden passing, maybe it wasn't sudden, but the passing of Detroit icon Mike Ilitch. And it kind of snowballed from there with the Wings dropping back-to-back games, Pistons splitting 2 games in a win against Toronto that was outstanding, but couldn't follow it up later on in the week. It just, it never ceases to amaze me. The Detroit sports scene, always evolving, always moving forward. It was just a very, and there's no other word for it. It was a very sad and surreal weekend.
Yeah, Friday was very interesting for me because I was able to cover the Oakland-Detroit game. Being a new media member, per se, covering college basketball, I got to go on the court there at Callahan Hall while Dick Vitale was giving a speech. So I'm sitting there taking it all in as he's talking about the team, the 1976-77 team that made a run in the NCAA tournament. So I'm sitting there taking it all in, looking over, seeing Thomas Hitman Hearns. Him and Dick Vitale had a moment there. Everybody was kind of reminiscing, talking about the past and being united as a team. Dick Vitale is an excellent speaker. I mean, he just captivates a room. He's one of those guys that you just kind of want to go talk to.
It's Dickie V, baby.
Exactly. And so coming off of the court, then getting ready for the game is then when I heard it. I scrolled through the tweet deck here on Twitter, and it just scrolled through. It says Mike Ilitch has passed away. So right before the game started, I got the news, and then Casey Hollins was to my left, and Jennifer Hammond were to my right. And you could tell when news breaks, they're abuzz. So they're like on the phone, looking at things like that. So they jetted, because they knew they had to get on this and get their situation, get their people that they wanted to line up for their reports, and they knew that the focus of their evening was about to change. So it was kind of a sad moment going, it was the realization that, okay, his story now has come to an end. He passed away, and you immediately go, right before the season. And the first thought I had was, man, he never won the World Series. That was his goal, owning the Detroit Tigers, and you just feel bad because when you know somebody wants something so bad, and they work at it, and eventually they don't get it, you still go, you know what? He was a great owner. He was able to have success hoisting the Stanley Cup. That's no small feat. And from all the reports over the weekend, from everybody that's been talking and sharing, I know well over thousands and thousands of people will gather at the Fox to go check him out in memoriam, checking out, the fact that he was laid out at the Fox, a building where the building that is the headquarters for Little Caesars. So it's just one of those things where you realize everything does come to an end. You are forced to, directly stare at the face of mortality, and you just go, you know what? Live every day to the fullest, have a good old time, treat people with respect, and try to have a legacy like a Mike Ilitch. And that's all you can do. In Detroit, there will be probably no greater owner of a sports team than Mike Ilitch. And it's just to his testament, all the respect and love that he's gotten.
Absolutely. The one good thing you can say about Mike Ilitch, and there's a ton of things you can say that are great about him, but he wanted to win. He was the owner who essentially was a fan, but he was lucky enough to be able to own multiple sports teams in the greatest city in all of the United States.
How'd you hear about the news?
I was on my way to the Michigan State hockey game over at the Joe, and me and my cousin were sitting there over a beer, and all of a sudden it just kind of came across my phone. I had happened to look down at my phone because I was in the middle of talking with my cousin and texting with my wife, and it popped up on my feed, and I was like, whoa. It was just kind of a very shocking, like I said, very surreal moment, like one of those things where you knew You knew he was in bad health. And every time you kind of seen him out in the public, he looked worse and worse and worse. But it was so sudden, you didn't expect it. It was the one thing that you didn't expect. I knew he was going to die, but I never expected Mike Ilitch to actually die. You know what I'm saying? I felt like I would say it to you all the time. They would dust him off with the mothballs because he would just kind of lay in his sarcophagus and they would just pull him out for special occasions. And it was a joke, and it was more to make light that, he's still pushing through. Like, the only way he's going to go out is once they win that World Series, because that was his ultimate goal in the end. The most shocking thing about his passing is all the stories that have come out and have flooded just the newspaper and the airwaves and the internet. I never realized that he was a Marine. I never realized that he had a minor league career for the Tigers playing shortstop. How awesome is that to sit there to be picked up by a baseball team, and you get sent to their minor league system and you sit there, you play baseball. You're never good enough to actually make it to the big leagues, but you're savvy enough to be able to put your business together to be able to go out and years later purchase that same team that gave you a shot in the big show. You know what I'm saying? How awesome is that? And this is a guy who paid for Rosa Parks' rent for over a decade. And overall, he was just a humanitarian. He was a guy who wanted to win as an owner. He was the best owner, I think, out of all the owners that we've had in this area. I don't think you can compare him to the Fords. Don't hold a candle to him. All right. Bill Davison was a great owner. He was a great owner, but I think Mike Ilitch beats him hands down. Tom Gores, I think he's more worried about the business side of things than actually winning and actually putting a decent product out there. Who else do we have here? Am I forgetting anybody? Davison, the Fords.
Mike Ilitch with the 2.
Yeah. He was the best owner out of everybody. I mean, this is a guy who brought the Red Wings back from the Dead Wings after he purchased them in 1982. Do you realize he made the playoffs 30 times in 33 seasons that he owned the team? That's outrageous. That's incredible. On top of that, he brought you 4 Stanley Cups in 13 years and could have brought you a 5th in 2009.
This might be a tough question, but now that you're talking about it, knowing that he was an owner in 2 sports, do you think that potentially if Gores makes a move for the Tigers, that he can actually execute it and do both jobs well? I know that obviously Mike Ilitch wasn't running the Tigers and wasn't running the Red Wings. He was able to establish really solid managers and overseers of the organization for the Red Wings. And then once he got Dave Dombrowski, obviously you got a baseball guy in there, but you still have to be invested across a lot of things going into free agency, the PR of the organization, a lot of things you got to go to probably related to dollars and cents. But I just got to think about it as you were talking. I'm not so sure that one owner can own 2 sports in the same town and really devote a lot to it. So if the Ilitches are going to keep just one, I'm kind of hoping they keep the Red Wings and go forward and maybe just make a move to reestablish what the Red Wings were, and maybe think about letting go of the Tigers, because when you see an evaluation of a franchise being $1.5 billion or so, maybe you seriously take a look at maybe selling. But do you think one owner can run multiple sports teams in the same state?
I think it's incredibly difficult because you've got to have the financial backing to be able to not just handle your business, what basically got you to the table. You now have to be able to take those funds, and you've got to be able to spread them thin, and you've got to be able to spread them in such a way that for every dollar you put out there, you've got to be able to bring back at least 2 to 3 times that amount. So you've got to do this not just with one organization, you've got to turn around and do it with another. So it becomes incredibly hard. And to have the success that Mike Ilitch had just speaks to, like you said, him being able to go out, not being afraid to spend the money, and being able to pick the right people, put them in the right place, and let them do their jobs, not meddle, not get in the way of it. The one thing that I would sit there and I crucified Ilitch on all the time was how he would tell Dombrowski, hey, this is what our finances are for the year. And then as the offseason kind of rolled around and Ilitch didn't get all the players he wanted, he would sit there and then turn around and write Dombrowski another check for like $200 million. Like, here, go sign this guy. It's like, why didn't you just give him the money up front so he could just do whatever he has to do to get the best types of players here? That always drove me insane. But that spoke more to him wanting to win, him saying, this is where we're at, and this is what you were able to do. Here's some more money. Go get me whoever's the best that you can get with this amount of money. And in the end, after he purchased the Tigers in 1992, I mean, it took a little bit of time, but he brought that organization back to relevance. This is an organization that made the World Series twice. This is an organization that won 4 AL Central championships. He never got the ultimate prize, which was that World Series. But he was able to take 2 teams from owning a small pizzeria in Garden City and turn these 2 franchises into respected blue chip companies that were respected not just in the National Hockey League, but across MLB. And it was just amazing the way he was able to do this. I mean, on top of all that, now you add and you factor in what he's done for the city of Detroit. This is a guy who is getting an arena built with a complex that's going to surround it, all in the vision of bringing people downtown and helping reinvest in the city. It's amazing what he's been able to do and how he's been able to help transform Detroit. This whole turnaround, everybody talks about the turnaround with the city of Detroit. He was at the forefront of all of it. He was there. He was the one who was pushing forward in trying to get this done. Before there was ever Dan Gilbert, before Tom Gores ever stuck his nose into downtown Detroit, it was Mike Ilitch. Before the Fords ever sat there and decided to build up that corner where Ford Field is, it was Mike Ilitch. Mike Ilitch was out there always pushing forward, always kind of driving the bus to make this city better, to sit there and bring it back to what it once was. And you're kind of starting to see the fruits of his labor, and it's a shame that he won't be able to be able to see it himself and really visualize what he's actually accomplished and what he's helped start.
Yeah, the Ilitch family will have their mark on downtown Detroit to help revitalize it and things like that. And for those that complain that, hey, they took public dollars, we understand that it's a business. Many people have said, hey, yes, they took public dollars, but they did invest quite a bit of their own money into these projects. So whether you come down on the side of, hey, they shouldn't have took any money or not, you got to look at it like this. They didn't have to take their headquarters of Little Caesars and move it to the Fox. They didn't have to invest any money to make the Fox a great place to go. Have you seen a show at the Fox in the better part of the last 10 years? If you have, it's an amazing establishment. It's a nice place to go see a show. You have that intimate vibe. And places like the Detroit Opera House, the Fox Theater, and places like that where you can go and be part of a show and be part of an entertaining night, it's something that these people that invest in these buildings, you have to give credit for. You know, sometimes we do take for granted the fact that, hey, there was Tiger Stadium and many people revered that stadium and there were a lot of great memories. But Mike Ilitch was a visionary. He said, you know what, the downtown area needs this new Comerica Park, and he built it. And he was able to, you know, really make people forget about Tiger Stadium. Do you really miss Tiger Stadium right now? When you look at Comerica Park, it's a nice venue. Comerica is nice. Sometimes you have to realize that in sports, you have to change. You have to evolve. And certain stadiums outlive their time. And the Tiger Stadium, by that point, by the late 90s and 2000s, it outlived its time. So he went out and he made Comerica Park. Joe Louis Arena, probably over a decade now, has outlived its time. Many people joke around of what a dump it is. And at this point in time, it's more of a place people are going to say, hey, goodbye, share one last memory. But that place has outlived its time. And he's willing to say, okay, I'm not going to try and uproot these teams and move to another state or try to get that, kind of pressure. But he was a businessman. You know, the new project for the new Little Caesars Arena is going to be done quick in the life of this podcast. We were podcasting when the ground was broke for that arena, and in the fall, it's going to open. That's how time fast. And you think it's easy to just say, hey, I'm going to build a district. It's not. So you have these owners that are willing to invest in a city, and it's going to provide us memories. Whether or not you want to get into the nitty-gritty of how much he took and the percentages, it's a debate that we all can have. But when you look at it in totality, with what Mike Ilitch was able to do to provide jobs for a lot of people and a lot of different kind of people as well. He ran a successful organization, and I can't say too many negative things about Mr. I.
The one thing that you kind of touched on it, but to kind of double down on what you said, him moving his entire organization, Ilitch Holdings, to the Fox Theater in downtown Detroit. Do you know how easy it is to leave your company out in say, like a West Bloomfield, maybe in Auburn Hills, maybe even a Southfield? You can just leave your company out there. By moving it into downtown Detroit, and everybody that works for you and works for your company, they then in turn, when they get their paychecks, they have to pay a city tax. And that right there that helps contribute to everything that goes back into the city. So yeah, he took some money for some public funds to build a stadium. Big deal. By him moving his entire corporation into downtown Detroit, do you realize how much he's put back into the city just through the taxation that's received? It's at least 1% for everybody who works in the city, or it's at least 0.5% for everybody who works in the city. And if you live in the city, it's 1%. So that amount of money that accumulates over time, he basically paid it back, whatever he took. So not just, like I said, a visionary for being able to push forward and get Detroit to where he wants it to be or where he feels it would be best suited. But like you said,
but let's not be naive as well. You realize that there were probably some financial gains for him, some tax breaks.
There always is.
Yeah, so
there always is.
But people are so
that's
idealistic.
That's the cost of doing business, though.
Yes, but people are so idealistic and they judge way too much these businesses that go down to Detroit and try to better themselves. Listen, it's just a simple numbers game. Okay, if you have $1 million and someone says, hey, listen, I'll ease your tax burden by 10%, move your stuff down there, you have to look at it. It's basically, in essence, hey, we're going to let you run your business and allow you to keep more of your money that you keep. And that's just the way it is. And anybody that challenges it really doesn't understand the nature of business, which is really simply no emotion involved, no feelings, no caring about the plight of others. Business means the bottom line. And any school you go to will tell you that. And if you have a talk with anybody with any business sense, they will tell you business is a no emotion game. It's a numbers game. And if, Sterling Heights was going to go to Mike Ilitch and go, hey, you can work here tax-free, his offices would be in Sterling Heights.
Absolutely, you're right.
So let's not be too idealistic, and let's really look at the total picture here.
No, you're right. But again, it takes some doing to be able to say, hey, I want this city to be in a better place. I want to sit there and do whatever I can do to help contribute to it being the way I see it. Trying to make it in his own image, in his own vision, and to be able to sit there and do that, there is some give and take. Like you said, it's business. And in business, you have to compromise. And he moved his entire organization down into the city. And look, he employs a lot of people. Ilitch Holdings is a massive, massive company. I mean, you might not realize what all is attached to it. But here, let me give you a little bit of some of the subsidiaries that belong to Ilitch Holdings. You've got Little Caesars, which you know about. You've got the Red Wings. You've got the Tigers. You've got Motor City Casino. You got Olympia Entertainment, Olympia Development, Blue Line Food Distribution, CCM Merger Incorporated. You've got Champion Foods, Uptown Entertainment, IH Gaming, and you've got the whole Little Caesar pizza kit. All of that is housed with Ilitch Holdings, which is based out of where? The city of Detroit. So every employee is in turn paying a tax to work in the city, which then goes back to the city being able to put money towards land funds, being able to put money towards getting the streets fixed, being able to sit there and put lights, in the above the road so you can see what's going on. And I'm not trying to make Mike Ilitch out to sound like he's a martyr here. I'm just telling you, him having the wherewithal and the vision to be able to go out and do these things is incredible. And when you sit there and you look at what his legacy will be, I really think it's going to be a Detroit visionary, a guy who wanted the absolute best for the city, a guy who was a lifelong Detroiter, a guy who sat there and cared about the people of the city. On top of it, like I said, he's done a ton of humanitarian things for not just the homeless or the poor or the needy, but I mean, great civil rights leaders like Rosa Parks. I mean, being able to pay her rent so she could stay in her home for almost 10 years. Nobody went up to him and said, hey, you should probably do this. This is a great PR. Nobody heard about it until he passed. This was a guy who was just like, hey, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. It's amazing everything that he was able to accomplish in his lifetime and was able to do.
And so now everybody's talked about his legacy. You've heard all the testaments from the former players, from people that work closely with him. We had Sean Belizean on the Motor City Sports Rant, kind of sharing memories of the time.
Great podcast. Check that out.
Yes, sir.
Right here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Yes, sir. It comes out each and every Tuesday. But everyone that talks about him talks about an individual that loved to win. So now you realize that Chris Ilitch, age 51, is going to be in charge of all of this. He's going to be in charge of the Tigers, going to be in charge of Ilitch Holdings, and the transition is smooth. We know who the ownership is. It was pretty much laid out years ago what the transition was going to be. But from all accounts, and when you go to these games and you talk to people,
it's a scary time, huh?
Yeah,
Just
people kind of are a little bit skeptical regarding Chris Ilitch. And I heard, whispering, I'm not going to say who, but once the news broke, a certain individual said, "Oh, look, let the shit show begin." And I'm like, "Oh, I wonder what he meant by that." But it probably means that the Tigers are probably going to be in flux and likely the organization that could be sold off because the value of that organization. People are noticing that the Marlins sale is probably going to dictate what the market's going to be for the Tigers. But when you see numbers like $1.6 billion and you realize what Mike Ilitch paid for that organization, that's a big flip. And you would think that in the near future, if one of the teams was going to be sold, I would think it would be the Tigers.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, all this money has just been invested in getting the Red Wings a new arena, a new complex, basically a brand new place to play and a brand new place to stay, and everything that's going in and around it. On top of it, basically new hockey town is what we can call it. It's a hop, skip, and a jump away from everything else that Mike Ilitch owns with Hockey Town Cafe. You've got the Fox Theater right there. It's all kind of nestled in right there on that corner of I-75. Now, Comerica Park's right across the street from all of that, but it's not nestled in directly adjacent from each other. Now, if there was one team, if they were to do one thing and one team was to be sold, I would believe it would be the Tigers. And the reason for this is if you look at the way that they've tried to control the salary cap this year, by basically paring some things down, trading some people away, not going out making that huge free agent signing that Mike Ilitch always did. They've talked about sitting there getting their books back in line. Usually you're getting your books back in line when you're about to make a sale. So again, like you said, what the team is worth, the fact that the Florida Marlins look like they're about to be sold, and they're about to be sold for a huge number, it would probably make sense if Chris Ilitch is all about the dollars and cents. It would make sense that the Tigers would probably be for sale. That being said, the one hope is maybe there's a guy out there like a Tom Gores, maybe it's Dan Gilbert, who could step in and be able to purchase those teams. That way, nothing happens. You don't have to worry about the team moving. You don't have to worry about too much upheaval and too much shifting. On top of it, those guys, Dan Gilbert more than Tom Gores, seem to be willing to invest the money that it takes for a franchise to be successful. Tom Gores, I think, is learning kind of on the job. I'd feel much more happy if there was to be a sale. Again, ifs and buts. If the Tigers were to be sold, I would feel much more happy if it was to Dan Gilbert and everything that he has going on with Rock Financial and Quicken Loans and all of that. Just because you see what he does with the Cavaliers. Him and LeBron had their issue. They were able to smooth things over, and I think that was his learning curve. On top of that, he's invested the money. He's put whatever is needed for the Cleveland Cavaliers to sit there and win a championship. He's invested time in and time again, so I think he'd do the same thing with the Tigers.
And also, too, while we're talking about this, I am hearing rumblings of maybe, just maybe, the Tigers, Red Wings are also interested in maybe starting their own network to broadcast the teams themselves.
Like an MSN?
Like a Yes Network. So that would also provide them with a great stream of income. So, and I know we're speculating that maybe Chris Ilitch would look at that number, but also, if he keeps the Tigers, there are opportunities for him to really establish an undertaking and start a network, and the money would just roll in. So I know many people will say, does he really need the money? I don't know. $1.6 billion seems like a nice chunk of change that you can maybe ease your burden off running a Tigers organization that's going to need a lot of work. He's going to have his hands in it because many people now are realizing the PR is going to be a little bit negative as the payroll shrinks. I think right now, early on, he's going to get the positivity of the new arena and district for hockey, but at the same time, he's going to take a lot of heat for the Tigers because there's a rebuild ahead, and many people are looking at it like, hey, he's holding the purse strings and he's going to tighten it really quick. It doesn't seem like early on, from what I'm reading and the perception, it doesn't look like he's going to garner the favor of a lot of fans early on with the Tigers. And if he holds on to Ken Holland for a year or two or three and doesn't make a move there, and the product on the ice doesn't improve significantly, the luster of a new arena and district nobody will care about. You know what I mean? Because if the Pistons continue to stink and the Red Wings don't make the playoffs for 2, 3, 4 years, I think Chris Ilitch has a chance to become a villain here real quick. So I'm interested to see if he's willing to undergo this undertaking of being an owner of two teams and to even do more. You start with the district because these businessmen always are looking for the next thing. And the next big pot of gold is potentially running your own network and charging people a boatload of money to watch it because, hell, if they charge $6, $7 a month, I don't see too many people not wanting to watch the Red Wings and Tigers on television if the prices for the arenas, if the prices to go to these events escalate a little bit. So the future's up in the air. I'm looking forward to reading about it. But Chris Ilitch, I'm interested to potentially get to know the man and see what kind of leader he's going to be because he's got big shoes to fill. Do you think, and I'll ask you, do you think he fills the shoes of his dad and gets a Stanley Cup, a World Series, or both?
Oh, that's a tough question. I wasn't prepared for that. I think if... And again, I don't know a whole lot about Chris Ilitch yet. I mean, we
still early, yes.
Yeah, he's always kind of been there. He's always been in the background, never really in the foreground, never really had to make any decisions himself. So I think kind of like the president, right? The first 100 days are really important to kind of see what you're going to get here. I think if he's driven like his father and he wants to win, he will be able to win a Stanley Cup and he'll be able to win a World Series. If he's more
financially driven?
Yes. If it's more about the dollars and cents to him, I don't be surprised if you see a sell-off of the Tigers. Take that money, roll it over into your financial district with the Red Wings and the Pistons and everything you got going on there. And I would say he'd probably win a Stanley Cup because, again, new arena. If you want people to show up and you want them to show up in droves, put a winning product out there. It's been proven time and time again. So I think a Stanley Cup, yes. The World Series is kind of an if. So we'll see. Just to kind of touch on some salary cap issues with the Tigers, headed into this year, they're looking at almost $190 million. Just total salary cap allocations. That's a lot of money. That's a ton of cash. Shoot, in catchers alone, you got over $2 million. Infield, you've got over $47 million. In your outfield, you've got almost $34 million, and because of your ace Justin Verlander and all those other high-priced starting pitchers you've got almost $71 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cash that you're just kind of throwing around. That hasn't even touched on your bullpen or your designated hitter.
So this year is going to be very interesting to see how the Tigers progress and what they're going to do the next coming years in terms of their salary allocations. And by all accounts, it's coming down. They're going to need to rebuild the minor league system. They're going to need to do a lot of things in order to get back to being a World Series caliber squad. But yeah, exactly. I agree with you 100%. But if you look at it right now as we're talking about it, there's no doubt that most people would say, okay, they've done it before in hockey. They know what they need to do. They need to kind of tank a little bit. They need to miss the postseason. They need to rebuild with youth, and they maybe need to evaluate who's running things. But most people, if you asked them at this point what organization has a chance to come back faster, I think most people would say the Red Wings. But right now, it's in transition, and we're all going to wait and see. And Detroit Sports Podcast will be here waiting and seeing, scratching and clawing, trying to get coverage of these two organizations because I will say this, of the organizations that we've contacted, the Ilitch organization, sports-wise, media-wise, has been the most challenging. So it'll kind of be like Mike Ilitch, winning the Stanley Cup. With all the failed attempts, it'll be like the Detroit Sports Podcast Network trying to get a phone call or an email answered. That will be our prize and claim to fame is to get somebody from the Ilitch organization to at least acknowledge us. Everybody else has zero, nothing from the Ilitch organization. But we're trying. We're clawing. We're scratching. You know it. You know it here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We're going to start acting like Mike Ilitch and try our best to win and bring you, the listeners, great Detroit sports content. Stay with us. We're going to take our first time out. We're going to do the DocNJock Wrestling Report, and we got a lot more great things to bring you. Jock Jams talking about the Detroit Tigers on this very episode of Doc and Jock. Stay with us on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Doc here for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thank you for your continued support and allowing us to keep the studio lights on, the microphones hot here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. If you like what you're listening to, you like the variety of podcasts that you hear, definitely check out our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. That's the easiest way to support us. You get all the news from the network. You can check out the work from Vito, myself, all the guys that are putting out great content almost each and every day. And hey, if you're prone to shop online, click through that Amazon banner, go about your business, shop, and then when you're on that Amazon page, just bookmark it. Anytime at all that you make an online purchase, it kicks us back a little something and helps us keep this project going. We've been going strong since 2013, and that's been largely due to the support of our supporters, and we greatly appreciate it. DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Ilitch don't want none of the doc, no doubt about it. Keep me in the box.
That's why he's avoiding those phone calls.
Maybe he's listened to, or he probably saw one of the funky, sarcastic tweets that I throw out there on our fine Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. But hey, it is what it is. That's how we grew this thing, was to be sarcastic, to be a little bit on the edge, and we're not butt kissing nobody, man. We just go out about our business, and it is what it is. And we'll take all the judgments, we'll take all the criticisms. Hey, that's what we do here. But do you know a squad that I'm really loyal to that's about to take some criticisms? Michigan State University. As I sit here, bro, it's a little bit of a tough time being a Spartan because, you hear things, and one of the shoe dropped earlier in the week. Curtis Blackwell was suspended, an individual that we've talked to. So it's one of those things where obviously Curtis is not going to be talking to anybody. He's probably going to be in a situation where he's going to be on lockdown mode. But upcoming in the next weeks, months, you're probably going to hear a lot of negative news regarding Michigan State due to the allegations of rape by 3 football players. You heard the news that Curtis was, in a meeting and he was escorted out. And whenever you hear your university being investigated and you hear allegations of rape, you hear allegations of maybe a cover-up, you hear a lot of things. And when you read about it, it doesn't seem right now to be a situation where the Michigan State program, as well as the whole Dr. Larry Nassar situation, right now the situation at Michigan State isn't looking too good. Hell, the Dan Dakich little drama looks minor compared to the mess that I think is coming in the coming months. We know here at the podcast, what we're doing is we're fact gathering, we're reading the reports. We're not going to just spew, names and things like that. And while people here are aware of some of the facts of the case and things like that, we're not going to be irresponsible and just spew names out and spew, the things that sources tell us. What we're trying to do here is just, really respect what's going on. But in essence, in totality, what's going on at Michigan State is not good. And it's really scary when you're a supporter of a college university and you're hearing potentially that a bunch of staffers' cell phones are being looked at. You're looking at who's messaging who, what goes on. And the cover-up is always worse if that is what went down. The cover-up and who's in the know and who knows what when. If people aren't really reporting, this could be a Joe Pa situation all over again. And it's never a good thing when your school that you support is involved in shit like this.
First things first, everything that we hear and everything that we get, we have to vet it before we can just kind of run with it. So just doing our own due diligence so we don't look silly and have egg on our face. But if I was to sit there and I want to take you back almost a year, take you back to last March, beginning of April. At that time, Michigan State sitting there competing in the college football playoff. It looked as though Michigan State's basketball team was poised to win a national championship. And then fast forward a year later, and it's like the athletic program surrounding Michigan State has just fallen apart. Whether it be the college football season that was a complete and utter disaster, the allegations of sexual assault that's going on with the football team and Curtis Blackwell. You have the entire issue with the gymnastics program where the gymnastics coach has stepped down. On top of that, you had the medical assistant and evaluator, Dr. Larry Nassar, and his sexual assault. And on top of that, his child pornography issues that are going on surrounding that. And then you look at the basketball team, which has kind of struggled to get out of the blocks, and that kind of boiling over with the whole Dan Dakich tweeting about how, Michigan State fans are whiners and the student athletes and the students aren't smart enough to get into Michigan. And then you have the students sitting in the is zone, and rightfully so, basically sitting there crucifying Dan Dakich during the game the other night against Ohio State. So just kind of a mess, a little bit of a dust storm and kind of a kick up of a problem surrounding the Michigan State athletic program. And it's just weird how a year later, it's like everything is flipped upside down.
Yeah, man. It's just one of those things where you got to do due diligence. You got to let these investigations come about. You got to always remember, though, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. I know in a society sometimes when a lot of information is available 24/7, we're quick to judge. So I'm in one of those modes where I just want to see what's going on. I want to hear what these investigations are going to bring up. But you do know Michigan State's being investigated, and the allegations of rape we always take seriously. We don't do any of that victim shaming, none of that. All we do is we say, hey, listen, there's these allegations out there. There's implications of staffers on Michigan State being aware of these things, and they're being investigated. And one of those things where we also have to wait and see if charges are brought and what these investigations, do bring up, because Duke is familiar with this in the whole lacrosse situation where they were basically labeled as troublemakers, and in essence, it was proven to be false. And you've had major magazines have egg all over their face and lose credibility by reporting things by people that are not being truthful or by spinning it in a way. And when you get too far down the road, we're never going to be like that. Hey, if we say something and we come back and we find out that it's wrong, we're going to double back and apologize. And that's just being, that's why I like having you and Vito being actually real journalists who have been trained that can actually lend to us some credibility here at the network. But we're not going to go down the road of just being, frivolous and, sensationalizing this whole thing. We want to keep it up above board. But for me, I'm just unsettled because I understand, and we've talked about it, and sometimes we've been a little bit joking about it, saying that, hey, in order to be a football program, you got to have some thugs, you got to have some dirty kind of guys in order to have a football team that's successful. But we were talking about is getting paid. Cash only, straight money. That's it. We're not talking about crimes. We're not talking, and that's the fine line, though. As I sit here saying it to you, when we were joking around about it, that you need some thugs. In essence, I'd probably now, knowing what's coming about for Michigan State, I'd probably rather have a clean program without the thugs. Just have a clean program and run your ship tightly. Have good guys. I know you may need guys on the edge of being like that, super aggressive and willing to win at all costs. But if you're going to have guys and you bring in guys to your organization and bring in guys to the school with question marks, it's not a good look. I don't sit here with a good feeling knowing what's being talked about with my school.
And you know what? The one thing I can say about Michigan State is they've got a great athletic director. Mark Hollis has been out in front of this. He's doing his due diligence. He said all the right things. He's doing all the right steps. There's a Title IX investigation going on to make sure that if what has happened and what is alleged did take place, he's going to take the necessary steps to make sure this doesn't harm Michigan State, doesn't harm the student athletes, doesn't harm any of their programs. So he's out in front of it, and I think he learned a lot, and I think he's doing everything possible because of the entire Baylor situation. It seems like more and more each day that stuff comes out about what took place in Baylor. And it's so surprising to me that the NCAA hasn't stepped in and basically given the death penalty to Baylor because of everything that they've covered up. And like you said, the cover-up is always worse than the crime. And look, a crime of rape, a crime of sexual assault, horrible.
Alleged.
Horrible.
Yep.
Yes, awful, absolutely brutal, right? But going about it and covering it up, like you, if something did take place, you knowingly know something like that took place, and you're like, don't worry about it, we'll fix it. You can't fix that. You just can't. These women are damaged. You've harmed them if what has taken place actually took place. So I think Mark Hollis is doing a great job getting out in front of everything and trying to address the situation and just trying to take care of everything that he can possibly take care of so it doesn't end up like the Baylor situation.
Does it make you feel squeamish or queasy knowing that there have been some things that have likely taken place all across this country, in regards to big-time athletics, football, basketball, big-time athletics where money is at stake, knowing that stuff has happened and probably money has changed hands to cover it up, whether it be to an officer, whether it be to the person that's the alleged victim, to kind of maybe hush it up and keep things, in an effort to keep things under wraps. I know what's going on. You know what's going on. It's just one of those things where now that we're talking about it, knowing that potentially people go out there to try to talk to these victims, to not report it, to maybe try to keep it hush-hush from the media, maybe money changes hands. Because if you're an organization and you got billions on the line, maybe not millions, maybe billions in future monies coming in, hey, a $15,000 payoff to hush somebody up is something that you may be willing to offer. And just thinking about it makes me feel gross. And it's one of those things where it's the further revelations of how big-time sports sometimes are run. And when there's big money involved, you know there's a little bit of corruption. And we've joked about it, we've talked about it, and we've made light of it. But when you really look at the deep-seated nature of big-time sports, it's kind of gross.
It is pretty awful.
It's gross and nasty, right?
Do you remember a couple years ago, I want to say it was 2014, Michigan had the whole Brendan Gibson situation where he allegedly raped a female classmate, and then you had Taylor Lewan basically physically threatening her, and that was disgusting, and I was totally appalled by it, and that was covered up for a couple of years when all that took place. So yeah, it is disgusting. It's kind of the nature of the beast, I guess, and that doesn't make it any better, but it's absolutely brutal, and it's because there is so much money at stake here. Look, the huge revenue sports in college athletics, like football, like basketball, basically pay for everything else. So if those programs aren't winning championships, aren't putting good products on the field, aren't sitting there and basically reinvesting in that athlete that is helping to get the program to this level where you're competing for Big Ten championships, or you're at least in the conversation, or you're getting these big games on ESPN because there's a ton of money there, what's going to happen? Everything's going to dry up, and then you don't have a fencing program. You don't have a girls' basketball program. You don't have a swimming program. You don't have all of these other programs, because the two sports that fund all of it are football and basketball. And that's usually where you hear where these stories originate from. It's usually something with the football team or it's something with the basketball team.
And with Michigan State and this whole Dan Dakich situation, I think it's one of those things where the Michigan State fan base is really hypersensitive to all this kind of news, and they don't want a guy like Dan
Dakich shouldn't have been doing that in the first place.
It's a shtick, you know it, and I know.
I understand that, but come on, man.
So what is everybody butthurt about?
Dan Dakich's son plays for Michigan for number one.
Number one, yes.
So that's an issue. 2, he's an ESPN analyst. Okay, so that's number 2. You're supposed to be unbiased. If you want to sit there and you want to hold a program to task, go ahead. But don't take shots at the students and don't take shots at the student athletes.
Not on Twitter, too.
Exactly. Because, look, man, anything you put on Twitter, it's going to stick. Just because you delete something doesn't mean it goes away.
Dude, last night someone sent it to me within 4 minutes.
Right.
People were questioning it within 4 minutes. Listen, You got to understand, okay, through the power of social media, everything that you say is recorded. Everything that you say and do is videotaped. Everything that you do and say potentially is going to be out there for consumption. So you have to own up to it. But if your job, like us, is a podcast, we're out here to talk. Our job here at the Podcast Network is to say things, is to have an opinion, and whether or not you like it or not, that's one thing, but you said it exactly right. An ESPN analyst covering a game should not be spewing an opinion where people can, make judgments, and the IZone gave it to him in the game versus Ohio State. They gave it to him hard.
And on top of that, again, his son plays for Michigan, the rival of that university that you just massacred on Twitter. Hello? Don't be a boner. Do you know how many stupid, irrational, just outrageous things I want to say on Twitter? I've got such a sarcastic sense of humor that I just want to sit there and I want to post things that just come off so uncouth, but I can't. And I've got a dirty sense of humor too. It's awesome. It's great. I can basically take anything and turn it into a sexual innuendo because it's so much fun for me, but I can't do it on Twitter. Do you know why? Because I want to work in an industry where that's the first thing they're going to go to check, to see if I can get a job with them. And if I'm sitting there talking about, I don't know, some kind of crazy joke in reference to a vagina or a penis, hey, it ain't happening for me. It just isn't going to happen for me. I'll be stuck here for the rest of my life doing this podcast with you. And hey, I love you and all, but I've got visions of grandeur.
No problem, man. Hey, I accept it. I know the deal. And that's the hope, is that you can one day put on a resume, you were part of this network and make big things. And when you do a one-on-one special, we get a little 12-minute talk about, your start in your career. That's all we hope for, man.
That's what happens. All right. Hey,
so wait.
I already told you. If I go, I'm taking you. You're what? You said you wanted to be at least the phone screener. I said I'll make you a producer.
So wait, no jokes about intravagina inspections going on this week?
Dude.
Let's keep it like that. Let's keep it as an inside joke between us.
All right.
Okay, no intravagina inspections going on, huh?
Oh, that was uncomfortable to listen to.
That was very uncomfortable to listen to. But with Dan Dakich, it's a shtick, and I get it. I respect it. I like the fact that, hey, you do, in this business, you try to get your name out there, and sometimes you got to be over the top. I get it. Look what Fox Sports is trying to do. They're trying to bring on all the hot take artists in order to, draw debate. And when people talk about their ratings or stuff like that, you're still talking about them.
That's true. You got Skip Bayless and you got Jason Whitlock, and both of those guys have mouths that totally overshoot their butts.
Exactly.
All the time.
That's the name of the game. You have to draw attention to yourself, and Dan is doing it, but at that spot. And what is interesting, though, is once corporate gets involved, okay, because he was scheduled on Wednesday to come talk to Jamie and Stoney in the morning. So I was like, I was excited to kind of see what he was going to say after the controversy, but Izzo ripped him a new one, and I think he got hushed by the big corporation, was like, you're not going to do it, because you don't see that too often. Dan's a guy that's open.
Yep.
He's been on Detroit Sports 105.1 a lot. That's a guy that will stand up for himself and back up what he says, but I think he was hushed. I don't like that.
He has no problem making outrageous claims, and then he has no problem sitting there debating them with you.
Yeah, he'll respond.
He's really good at that, and you're right. What ended up happening was the four-letter network stepped in and was like, look, you're going to have to lay low for a while. And
it's getting out of hand here.
Yeah.
See, there's not news there, though. Many people know that Michigan has higher academic standards than State. And I think if you read the tweet, and I find it funny, is that he was just taking a jab at somebody that was messaging him on Twitter. And I get the same kind of thing, because that's how I can relate to it, is that we get jabs, we get people that talk about my tweets, and we get people that talk about the network, and we take sarcastic jabs back. But what's happened is it was highlighted by Tom Izzo. The facts are all there. We just want to know what Dan Dakich thinks about it. And I'm certain he'll take a company line and say something along the lines of, hey, I'm just replying to this guy talking to me, talking trash to me, so I'm talking trash back to him.
And with that segue, I think we talk about wrestling now.
I look forward to the weekly dose. This will be a new thing on the podcast. The weekly dose, the DocNJock Wrestling Report. And I know the week that was absolutely awesome. The whole Elimination Chamber, up until the main event, I would rate as a C. It wasn't that great. It was one of those things where I was passively watching it because there was some shit going down at the Grammys all night long. Whether it was Adele messing up, whether it was James Hetfield not being able to talk into a microphone, there was a lot of shit going down on the Grammys. So I was watching that on the big screen and the WWE Network on the phone. So once the Elimination Chamber happened, I was geeked, and I was like, okay, I got a good feeling that maybe Cena's not going to walk out of here with the title, put it back on AJ Styles, set something up maybe from this match into WrestleMania. But what happened was pretty surprising and something that was well-deserved. Bray Wyatt, probably the most underutilized, underbooked guy in WWE. Maybe they rushed him too fast for this, but hey, putting the title on him, I was all for it and made it a great pay-per-view just due to the fact Bray Wyatt has a title right now.
Like you said, it was a very slow and plodding pay-per-view. There were points where it was totally boring, and you were just like, okay, what else is going on?
I didn't even watch Naomi's title win. I didn't even watch it at all.
That had like 4 botched spots. It wasn't. It wasn't a good match at all. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. The Becky Lynch match against Mickie James, that was pretty solid. It started with Mojo Rawley, and I'm just kind of like over him. But yeah, you're right. It was just kind of like, all right, can we just get there already? And then once the Elimination Chamber match happened, it was a really good match. I mean, John Cena took a huge bump from high off the Elimination Chamber. The whole thing with The Miz basically being terrified to come out and Dean Ambrose basically doing a schoolboy and rolling up Baron Corbin. Very interesting, because now I think that sets up for WrestleMania. You're going to have probably an Intercontinental title match between those two. Rumors and speculation are that The Miz and Maurice are going to be taking on John Cena and Nikki Bella for WrestleMania. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out. And then Bray Wyatt wins. And I wasn't really surprised, because if you read any of the message boards and you kind of listen to kind of what's been talked about, it seems as though they're building towards this destructive relationship with Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton, and that looks to be really interesting how they're going to do that. I myself, this is me personally, I'm kind of over the Bray Wyatt Randy Orton angle. I was over it like 2 months ago. I'm like, all right, can we just move on now? So it looks as though this is going to come to a head for WrestleMania. It'll be interesting. The fact that Bray Wyatt won the title, I think, is great. The one thing that I do not like is I don't like the way that the title got passed to Bray Wyatt. Again, you put the title on Cena so he can hold it for 2 weeks just to hand it off to Bray Wyatt. What's the point? Why not leave it on AJ Styles? And then again, AJ Styles, he gets beat clean on SmackDown the week prior to the Elimination Chamber. And then in the pay-per-view, he is the one who gets beat for the title. You're disrespecting. I feel like you're disrespecting the guy who has carried your company for the last 6 or 8 months. You're disrespecting probably the best and most over guy you have on your roster. This is a guy who you could send to Raw, and he would be, you could strap a rocket to his back, and he'd be an incredible superstar. He is the most over heel. He is, in essence, what Steve Austin was in the Attitude Era. Because Steve Austin was the most over heel. The fans loved Steve Austin. They loved when he sat there and he took a bedpan and he smacked Mr. McMahon in the head with it in the hospital room. And when he dressed up like a nurse, everybody loved it. You loved when him and The Rock were going at it and he got thrown over a bridge and the Smoking Skull title belt got thrown over the bridge. Everybody loved it. Austin was so over. That is AJ Styles right now. And as we build to go to WrestleMania, what does AJ Styles have going on? What is he being scheduled to work here? He has no match. This is a guy who has helped carry your brand and your organization. He got moved to SmackDown. They broke up the club, which I thought was stupid. They broke up the club to give him his own shine, so he didn't have to sit there and basically carry Anderson and Gallows, because that's what he was doing. Because Anderson and Gallows, as soon as Styles left, they've kind of disappeared and fallen into the background of everything that's going on with the tag situation. AJ Styles, and I know they're the champions right now, but do you care? Do you really care? Nobody gives a crap. So AJ Styles basically carried the organization, and he gets put onto SmackDown, and he carries the brand for SmackDown. And for numerous weeks, SmackDown has been the better program than Raw. And a lot of that is because of AJ Styles. It's his ability to work. It's his ability to do a promo. And we've talked about his promos. They need a little bit of work for his heel edge. But if you were to make him a babyface, he'd be so over. So over. It's ridiculous. And yet, headed to WrestleMania, I can't tell you what they're going to do with him. He has nothing set up. There is nothing they're going to do with him.
Nothing good enough for the caliber of guy.
Right.
That's a guy that should be main event all the time. And, you're exactly right. Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt, but it is fresh. I think the reason why they wanted to do it was you want to have some buzz going into WrestleMania, and Bray Wyatt definitely does that regarding Randy Orton, regarding what they could do with it, the back and forth nature of the Wyatt family. Does Randy Orton stay under the spell of Bray Wyatt? I liked SmackDown more than Raw a little bit this week. I thought the best part of the week, hands down, going into, and we'll definitely look into in future episodes of this podcast, look into the storylines heading into WrestleMania, but hands down, from the pay-per-view, Raw, SmackDown, the best segment of the week, and many will argue maybe the best segment in the last 3 years, was the Festival of Friendship from Raw.
So good.
It was so great,
good.
Well executed. It built up to the moment when we all knew, and it started to become clear that Kevin Owens was going to turn on Chris Jericho. And that segment right there was on the level of the Mega Powers breaking up when Hogan and Savage broke up. On the level when Shawn Michaels super kicked Marty Jannetty. It was on that
Through the
level.
barbershop window.
Why? Because Chris Jericho is an amazing storyteller. And dude, when he busted out that photo, I must have laughed so loud that the entire neighborhood was like, what the hell is going on? It was so funny.
Dude, the statue was great too.
Yeah.
Minimalist Maximus. It's just like, just words. He just puts words together and they're amazing.
And you could tell they were trying to struggle from not laughing when that photo was revealed.
Dude, it was so great.
And the best part is, what makes wrestling awesome is the blurred line between real and the scripted nature of it.
Yep.
When Jericho said, like, listen, this last year has been awesome, that it's really revitalized me, the chemistry that we have, you knew it was coming.
Yep.
You knew it was just going to be when. And it happened, and what it did was it elevated Kevin Owens, because now he's even worse of a heel, and the drama with Triple H talking to him beforehand added to the lore of it. So the entire show, Raw, was good. SmackDown was a little bit better because, like I said, just a 2-hour show. They can get a lot into it, and it's more concise. But that segment on Raw, hands down, one of the best of all time.
Let me start here. This has been some of the best work Chris Jericho has done. I have loved Chris Jericho since his days in WCW, ECW, just early in his career. I followed him forever. This has been some of his best work. And I tried to explain this to my wife when we watch wrestling, and she looks at me and she's just like, I don't get it. I was like, he is amazing at what he does. Just simple things. And I think she finally got it this week when we sat there and we watched the whole Festival of Friendship, and the way he sold it and the way he built it and just got it out there. And then he does his thing with the statue, does his thing with the picture, which was amazing. And then he gets his gift from Kevin Owens, and just his ability to sell that entire moment. It was one of those things, we all knew it was coming, right? You knew. I didn't expect it now. I didn't think it was coming this early. but we all knew it was building. And the moment he opens it up and he's so excited, oh, it's a new list. This is great. Hey, wait, why is my name on the list? And then he drops the box and you see it says the list of KO on it. And at that moment, I don't know about you, but my heart broke. Because I've been so invested in Jericho for, I don't know, weeks now. Because you knew what was coming. You knew that moment. You knew. You seen the look on his face of just confusion and, oh crap, what's about to happen? And the next thing you know, he gets a stiff forearm from Kevin Owens, and Kevin Owens goes on to destroy him. One of the absolute best segments. This has been one of the best builds, and the reason why, it's got you invested emotionally. You've laughed. It's been silly at times. It's been confusing at times where Jericho will come into a match and he'll sit there and he'll hit a code breaker on Kevin Owens. And you're like, what's going on here? Is this the fallout? Or are they going to break? Oh, no. He did it so he could save Kevin Owens' belt. And to have Kevin Owens be the one who finally does the turning, like you said, it elevates him more as a heel. It adds more question marks because what did him and Triple H talk about before? And what's going to happen now? How hurt really and truly is Jericho? What's going to happen from this point forward? And this has been some of the best work he's done in his career, that being Jericho. Exceptional. Hands down, outstanding. That was the best part of Raw. It was so great. And then I don't know if you've seen it on Facebook. They have a Facebook meme of it building up, and then they play the Titanic song right as he's getting punched, and it kind of plays through the background as he's getting annihilated for like 4 minutes. It's great. So great. And it just makes it that much more heartbreaking.
Yeah, man, this week in wrestling, a lot of great things to come. Listen, I'm going to throw a wrench in the mix here. We got to talk about something live producing as we talk here. So we'll take a quick time out. We'll come back and maybe have something of a surprise nature in the works here. Stay with us. Doc and Jock, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
Doc and Jock here for Fanatic U. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag and you love your Detroit teams, and I mean you really love your Detroit teams, you got to check out FanaticU.com and get the coolest gear out there and rock your Red Wings shirt, rock your Lions shirt, rock your Piston apparel. Wear it till the wheels fall off. Michigan State, you know what? They got it too. Check out Fanatic U. They have 6 locations all over Metro Detroit. Check them out, FanaticU.com.
Yeah, we coming now. Come on. Yeah, that's right. We put it down. It's like a family in here, just a little disabled. Putting it down, we lay them out on the table. Yeah. Who's in the house? The brothers in the house. Gotta turn it on out, let you know what we about. Kinda like Cain and Abel, a bit unstable. Don't be breaking the brain, break the whole damn table.
All right, thanks for sticking with us through that quick timeout. Love the live nature of doing this podcast where, hey, we shoot out messages sometimes with no real expectation that we'll get a message back. But hey, at this point in time in the podcast, what we're going to do is we're going to play a round of Jock Jams. I got some great questions lined up for the Jock. I know he's going to bring it and deliver because he has the knowledge. He does his research, does his homework, and this is what we call Jock Jams. All right, cuz, on Sunday afternoon, Red Wings forward Gus Nyquist tried to carve out Minnesota's Jared Spurgeon's eye with a high stick. He was offered an in-person hearing to discuss what transpired, but he declined, instead opting to do a phone interview. Was this smart?
This was absolutely just ridiculous. Look, if you go back and you watch the video, it's pretty damning. It looks as though he sat there, he had some malice, he intended to do what he did. It looks as though he took his stick, turned it over so the point end of his stick was out so he could sit there and basically gouge out the eye of Jared Spurgeon. Now, look, Gus Nyquist, he's known around the league as basically being a gentleman. He might sit there and get a penalty now and again, but for the most part, this is highly unlike him. It seemed as though he was frustrated, he was upset, he was getting cross-checked in the back. That being said, there are just rules, unwritten rules in hockey. And taking your stick, turning it over so the point end is basically out so you can do damage, and then going and hitting a guy in the face, you just don't do it. Now, on top of that, you're given an in-person interview, so that means automatically you're looking at least 6 games for a suspension. You take that. You take that opportunity to go talk with the review board, talk with the discipline board, and get things out there. Express to them that, look, this was not like you. This is highly unlike your nature. It was an accident. It was one of those things that just kind of took place. I didn't mean for it to happen. And you kind of sit there and you point out different things that they're looking at on the video that helps make a case for you. Because no matter what, he's going to get suspended. It's now trying to mitigate how many games he gets. There's talks that he can get anywhere from 6 to 12 games. That's incredible. That's a lot of, I mean, you're missing like an eighth of the season at that point, you know? Look, you never turn down the phone interview or the in-person interview to opt for a phone interview. You always go and you take that opportunity to sit there and explain your side of the story and what took place.
How many games do you think he will be suspended? Now, I know many people don't think of Gus Nyquist as being a malicious player, but when you see it and when it's slowed down, it's a pretty bad hit. You could have done some serious damage, and when he's talking and when he's making his case, I don't know what he can do to maybe limit the suspension, but when he did that, it was in retaliation because I know, players take liberties with each other, but you got to be responsible for your stick, and he could have did some serious damage and done some damage to Spurgeon that could have been long-lasting.
He's going to get, I think he's going to get at least 6 games. Again, taking into account his prior history, which there isn't one, the fact that he is a gentleman, I think this all bodes very well for him and kind of mitigates his suspension from being somewhere north of 6 games, around the 10-game mark. So I think he'll probably get 6 games. He'll have to be sidelined, which really sucks because the Red Wings are a team that struggle to score points, and anything that Gus gives you is a good thing. And he has times and he has moments in games where he looks like the Gus of 2-3 years ago, where he can put the puck in the net at will. So this is going to be a big loss for this team. They'll probably have to call up a guy like a Tyler Bertuzzi, sit there, try to fill that out and fill out the roster. But yeah, this is not going to help the Red Wings out at all.
All right, switching gears, talking about the team that plays at the Palace of Auburn Hills. The Pistons continue their roller coaster season, winning, losing, winning, losing. Do you believe Ish Smith gives this team the best chance to win night in, night out? When you look at the advanced stats, when you look at the team's play, it seems like there's more chemistry with Ish Smith and Tobias Harris than there ever was with Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond. And many people are talking, speculating about the potential moves that could be made. And when you look at it, it just seems like since Reggie Jackson came back, it doesn't look like they've been able to come back to play at the level they need to compete in an East that you can do some things in if you just play well.
Absolutely. I think Ish Smith is kind of the key here. And look, the Pistons had that players-only meeting earlier in the season, and they basically went ham on Reggie Jackson, talking about how he is lax on defense, how he's basically a liability, and the fact that he's trying to take over the game and kind of control play too much. Ish Smith, he's more of a pass-first point guard. He's not a defensive liability. He's willing to sit there and run around on guys. And yeah, I think Ish Smith is kind of the key here. This team, in the way that the offense runs with Stan Van Gundy, you need a pass-first facilitating point guard. And Reggie Jackson likes to play hero ball. He gets in his groove, gets in his mindset that, hey, I got the ball, I want to go, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to take the shot. He'll dribble it up court, and then he'll sit there and he'll launch a 3. So you get 0 possession time out of it. Nobody gets an open look, and he's just chucking the ball. Next thing you know, you got to run back down the floor. And on top of that, I've already said, he's a liability on the defensive side. Now, compound that with what you're getting out of Andre Drummond. And Drummond on the defensive side, he still hasn't been able to figure it out. He's kind of a liability as well. So yeah, if I am the Pistons, if I'm Stan Van Gundy, I'm taking all offers for either a Reggie Jackson or an Andre Drummond. I'm going to see what I can get out of these guys, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to look good and long and hard at what these offers are in front of me. I was reading something the other day, and basically Reggie Jackson's trade value has bottomed out completely.
Me and Vito were joking about it when we recorded. Like, I put on our Twitter page, D-League talent for Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, and that's basically what you're looking at right now. I mean, honestly, his trade value has totally hit the floor. And compare that to where he was last year. Compare that to where he was headed into this season. He was supposed to be the hands-down leader of this team, and you're not getting what you're supposed to be getting out of him. He's not reliable on the defensive side of the ball. He can't sit there and score when you need him to score. On top of that, he doesn't like to facilitate, and he turns the ball over too much. A guy like Ish Smith, you're basically getting for half the price, and he doesn't turn the ball over, and he's willing to pass. So, again, if the offers are coming in for a guy like an Andre Drummond or for a Reggie Jackson, I'm listening.
You know, when you read articles, and I'm not sure you're referencing the ESPN article that I read, when you read the national perspective of Andre Drummond and you read the local coverage, it's one of those things where I don't like to hear a guy receiving a huge check every 2 weeks, not putting forth the effort night in, night out. What does everybody talk about with Andre Drummond? They know he has talent. They know he has size. But what are reporters looking at and what are they commenting on? His effort. You can't coach that. I mean, how do you not have effort? The organization has maxed you out. You're buddies with the owner. He went to bat for you. And night in, night out, it's not perceived that you're giving effort. Now, I know he's 23 years old, but I don't like the perception that he got paid, now he's taking the time off. I don't like that. It's just one of those things where, as a fan, as somebody commenting on it, it stings. It hurts. You want ride or die players. And to hear that locally, nationally, and you kind of see it, the guy could be doing more. And maybe it's something where night in, night out, it's really hard being a big guy to put forth that effort, but it's being talked about. It's being noticed. You can kind of tell that sometimes people are commenting that he looks lost out there on the court defensively. And it's sickening that we have to even entertain the notion of trading for Jahlil Okafor because he's got an inside game. And Andre doesn't. He plays great defense, but has no post-up moves. And Jahlil Okafor is a great inside presence, but struggles on the defensive end. It stinks because we need to kind of blend that. And to even consider giving up a first-round pick for Okafor is disgusting. You have that guy. Evolve. You're being paid $20 million. You're not a young chicken anymore. 23 years old. I know there's room for patience, but when it involves hustle and working hard, I don't like that kind of talk.
When you got a guy like an Aaron Baines or you got a Boban Marjanovic, easy for me to say, right? When you've got these guys basically as your number 2 and your number 3, and those guys you can put on the floor and you're going to get the effort that you desire from those guys, and they're making a pittance of what you're making, this is basically spitting in the face of the organization. On top of it, Stan Van Gundy's come out and he said, hey, look, Aaron Baines is a starter in the league. Like, we've got a steal here, So if you are able to trade Andre Drummond, I feel pretty confident with what you have in your center position with those two guys to be able to sit there and do something and make some noise in the playoffs. Because Aaron Baines can play at any point during the game. He doesn't have to be pulled out the last 4 minutes because you're afraid that he's going to miss foul shots. He can sit there, he can play defense. On top of it, Boban's been outstanding when given time. He's been incredible when he's been given time. There's got to be a role for him somewhere on this team where you can carve out 10 or 15 minutes a night, and he'll give you the points. He's a huge presence down low. The guy can play some defense. He can score in and around the rim. So there's got to be some give and take here. And if Andre Drummond's not going to sit there and put the effort forth, I think you've got two guys on this roster right now who can step in and will fill in admirably for him.
The All-Star break is upon us. It's going to be interesting to see what Stan Van entertains and what he's going to do to try to improve this team. Now, the talk of the mixed martial arts world and the boxing world has been this fascination with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. Everybody kind of wants to see what would happen if these two fought. Now, there seems to be more rumors. It's heating up that a deal has been reached in principle. And The Sun, a UK paper, is kind of coming out and saying, hey, they're really close. All that's needed is to sign the deal. And Floyd Mayweather's coming out saying, whoa, pump the brakes. Maybe this isn't exactly true. Is this the most anticipated fight since Tyson Holyfield number 2? And would you be entertained and would you be willing to drop the $100 probably that it would cost to watch Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather? It's going to be a boxing match if it happens.
I think so. I mean, look, we had the Mayweather-Pacquiao match, and that was probably about 4 years past its prime, and I sat there and I ponied up some money to watch that, and I got together with a couple friends, and that was an utter disappointment.
Hating life paying that.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. So I think so. I mean, this has been talked about now for months. It seems almost like it's been a year now since this has been kind of in the works, because there are days where you'll sit there and you'll hear 5 different reports about 5 different things in relation to this. But I would probably pay up to $150 to get this pay-per-view to watch it. Of course, I'd go in on it with a couple people. But this is... I don't think this is going, like you said, it's going to be a boxing match, but this is going to be more of a spectacle than an actual fight, I think. This is one of those things where you can sit there and you can say, hey, I was there for this. I watched this happen. And, it seems a little bit unfair, and I believe if this was to actually take place, I think Mayweather ends up winning this match because watching Conor McGregor fight, he basically swings to knock your block off, right? And when you get in there and you're fighting against a boxer who's going to kind of sit there, try to duck you, dive you, he's going to sit there and end up piecing you up. And I don't think Mayweather has the knockout power like McGregor does, but I think Mayweather in the end is elusive enough and does enough to keep you at arm's length and avoid the big hit. And that's kind of what's led to his career being what it has been and him being undefeated. Now, if Conor McGregor knocks Floyd Mayweather out, oh my God, is there a story there? Is there ever a story? A UFC fighter, a guy who is not classically trained in boxing, knocks out the undefeated Floyd Mayweather. What? Is this what we're really talking about here? So, again, I think it's a spectacle, and I think you're watching to see what happens. Does Conor McGregor end up getting knocked out by round 2, round 3? Does he end up tiring himself out? Because if it's a boxing match, I'm assuming it's going to go 12 rounds, maybe 15 rounds. Does McGregor sit there and actually get punch drunk at some point and just totally tired out because Mayweather is just kind of running around the ring and kind of piecing him up little by little, just sticking and moving? Or does Conor McGregor actually sit there, slip a punch, and totally catch Floyd Mayweather just right on the jaw, and he goes night-night? I mean, that's why you're watching this. That's why you're going to pay, in essence, of $150, maybe $200 for this fight, and that's why it's so talked about right now.
See, what I see is it's all angling, it's all hype. They're going back and forth, yes, no. McGregor's in Vegas taking pictures, making fun of Floyd being retired. They're hyping it up. I think it's getting closer. They got to hammer out. You got to remember, in a fight like this, it could be boxing's first billion-dollar fight in terms of a gate. So if each fighter is going to make $100 million, you have all the pay-per-view money, you have all the people that are going to attend the spectacle. It's not something where a contract is just like hammered out on a newspaper. You know what I mean? You got to kind of go through, and the intricacies of the deal have to be put together. The UFC is involved because you got to remember.
I think the UFC is going to be the one thing that's going to hold this up because, again,
they got to get paid. They want their paper.
Of course. Conor McGregor is their star, right? Before him, it was what's her nuts? Ronda Rousey. And Ronda Rousey has basically had 2 back-to-back fights that have been absolute garbage, where she's looked totally outpunched, outworked, and just kind of out on her feet seconds into the match. So McGregor is their superstar. He is their guy, right? And yeah, he lost to Nate Diaz a little while ago, but he came back and got his revenge and his retribution. But if he gets knocked out by a guy like Floyd Mayweather, what's that say about your sport? So UFC has a whole lot on the line to lose, and I think they're going to be the one bargaining chip that's going to be difficult to overcome here. And you're right, they do want their money. And the thing is, they have to decide whether or not this is smart for the company for this guy, their guy, the guy, the mouth of UFC to sit there and go and get into a fight like this and possibly risk getting knocked out.
Yeah, exactly. The UFC has a lot to lose because it could impact the brand. And when you pay $4 billion for something, you better make sure that it's worth it because, I do think it might be worth it for all the coverage. If they say UFC star, Conor McGregor, UFC star, all the way leading up to it, and they're able to get their marketing out of it, it might as well be worth it because, in essence, everybody's going to be talking about it. All the eyes on the boxing and mixed martial arts world will be on. I hope it happens. I hope this is not just a cat and mouse game because if we wait another 3 years or 4 years, like, the way Pacquiao and Mayweather jacked it all up.
That was so brutal.
It was absolutely brutal. Great round of Jock Jams, sir. I'm very impressed.
Thank you, sir.
You can't teach that.
Way to bring that drop back. I like that.
No doubt about it. Now, potentially one of the last topics we're going to talk about on this podcast, maybe something in the works. Stick with us. Maybe a surprise at the end of this podcast. We'll keep our fingers crossed and see how the inner workings of the internet get to work out for us. But, we're going to talk about the Detroit Tigers. We have to because pitchers and catchers have reported by the time this podcast come out, the majority of the infield players and the role players will be flying out to Lakeland because position players report on Friday. But in looking at it, a lot of people, and it's no joke, it's no surprise. I mean, it's not breaking news here that the expectation for the Detroit Tigers in 2017, not that great. You started off from the Vegas perspective with odds of 25-1 that the Tigers would win the World Series. Since the winter has progressed, now as we approach the Detroit Tigers going to Lakeland, the odds are 33-1 that the Detroit Tigers would win it all. And, the odds just keep going up and up and up, almost to the point now where I wouldn't even drop any money. I'd probably need about 50 to 75 to 1 to make any kind of financial commitment to the Detroit Tigers. But do you think this season, coming in this way is a good thing for the Detroit Tigers? Because many people have no expectations that this team is going to do anything. And maybe, just maybe, in a few minutes here when we talk about it, there might be a strong motivating factor pushing this 2017 team. It's good to come in under the radar.
I don't think it hurts the team, especially with them not going out making any huge moves. So, yeah, they get to kind of fly a little bit not so close to the sun, and you can kind of head into spring training and really focus on what you need to do. You're not going to have all that hype surrounding you. So, yeah, this might help out in the long run. It just kind of feels like it's one of those things where spring training kind of crept up on us, and I feel like the baseball season is going to kind of creep up on us just because there isn't that hype. There's not all that conversation about, oh, hey, this player is playing center field. Oh, hey, this player is in our bullpen. Oh, hey, this player is the new starting pitcher. Oh, hey, did you hear what Miguel Cabrera did? There's none of that going on this year. So, yeah, it might help out in the long run because you don't have all of that. You don't have all of those other distractions taking place. So it might help out the team. I feel from a fan perspective, it's almost like it just seems like it's a really, really weak season. And I think that you've got lowered expectations now as you head into the season. I'm not expecting them to win a World Series. Whereas seasons before, it was World Series or bust. I'm expecting them to sit there and try to contend for the American League Central, maybe a wild card spot. I don't expect them to win the Central. I expect them to sit there and maybe be in the wild card hunt as we sit there and we turn our eyes towards September. But other than that, it's kind of what it is right now. It's just kind of, all right, well, here's the Tigers. Let's roll out the balls and the bats and see what we can do.
Yeah, because everybody around town, when they look at the squad, they go, oh boy, they didn't make a whole heck of a lot of moves. I mean, when you say Al Avila, when you say, what is your job title? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go out there and retool this team. And when you go out there and basically just bring back Alex Avila and make one move to let go of Cameron Maben, it doesn't really instill a whole heck of a lot of confidence. And that's why the betting odds shot way up. It's one of those things where it's a little bit sad at this point in time that Mike Ilitch passed away and that the Tigers basically are forced to kind of use this as a rallying cry. Vito had thought that that's a good thing that Brett Osman said, hey, this squad should use it as a rallying cry to win one for Mike Ilitch. But I was thinking, you know what? I understand that, but you should have really wanted to win and, maybe had that carry over last year during the Atlanta series for Mike Ilitch, that extra. But if that is what it takes for the Tigers to find something to rally around, let it be, Mike Ilitch, hey, I'll take it. I'm not totally opposed to it. I just think that it's just one of those things where the Tigers seem to be searching for anything because of the fact that the talent is not there. And when you compare the Tigers to the Cleveland Indians, the gap in talent has widened.
Absolutely, yeah. Like Cleveland is the team,
the class of the Central.
Yeah, they're the team to beat this year. I mean, look, we still don't even know who's playing center field for this team. That's brutal. When I tell you that they don't even have a starting center fielder, it's definitely going to be a platoon situation. It's just who's going to be out there now. This is setting up and shaping up to be one of those seasons where you're just going to kind of scratch your head. On top of it, what has killed this team in the past? Generally, it's been the bullpen and lack of defense. You have no defense in center field, which is huge. You basically need a Vespa to get around out there. On top of it, your bullpen hasn't been upgraded. You're trying to count on K-Rod again for another year. And again, he's older. So what are you expecting here? There's going to be some type of a fall off. So the way this team is kind of set in position to head into the season, it leaves a whole lot of question marks, which makes me wonder, what's the one thing that you're kind of looking forward to most during spring training? Because I know for myself, I want to see if the starting pitchers can take that next step forward, because I think this team is going to rely heavily on those 5 guys. They've got to stay healthy, but if Justin Verlander can turn in a performance like he had last year, if Jordan Zimmerman comes back healthy, and again, these are all ifs, if Rookie of the Year Michael Fulmer sits there and performs better than he performed last year, and you get some production out of Daniel Norris, and if Matt Boyd can crack that starting rotation, I think you've got a pretty solid starting pitching staff that's going to give you a shot. On top of it, I think it's a little bit deeper this year. Just kind of doing some research and some reading. It looks as though they have 10 to 15 guys who can kind of sit there and fill out as a starting pitcher, which is great. You don't need that many guys, and I'm not trusting Anibal Sanchez to be a starting pitcher. That guy's definitely going into my bullpen if I'm the coach. But you got a guy like Drew Verhagen who's sitting there kind of rehabbing himself, and he wants to give it a shot as a starting pitcher instead of sitting there coming out of the bullpen each and every day. So I want to see if the starting staff can take that next step forward and really produce and be the strength of this team, because the bullpen's not that strong. Again, we don't know who's in center field. You've got another year on guys like Victor Martinez and a Miguel Cabrera and an Ian Kinsler, and who really knows what you're going to get out of Justin Upton? I mean, last year was such a mixed bag. It was so up and down. Yeah, he turned it on in September, and that's really what helped fill out his numbers. But man, it was a struggle to get to September with that guy. So you gotta lean on something, and you gotta lean on somebody. And at this point, it looks as though this team is going to lean on its starting rotation. And that being said, I want them to take that next step forward to sit there to prove to me that they are going to be the Rock of Gibraltar for this team, and that night in, night out, your starting five are going to sit there and be able to give you 6 strong innings, maybe 7 or 8.
For me, superstar, baby. I'm just looking forward to seeing what Michael Fulmer can do. Does he, is he able to live up to the hype? A lot of strikeouts. Fastball, I want to see, has he evolved other pitches? What's he working on? So that's what I'm looking forward to. For me, I think it's a good thing maybe to have lower expectations with this squad. One of those things where you look at it and you go, you know what? It's a situation where you got a team that doesn't have much in terms of talent that could get you to the World Series, but there is enough talent to compete. And that's what you got to look at is you go, you know what? If we are honest with ourselves and we say if everybody stays healthy, they have a chance. Maybe if they can get off to a great start, maybe be 15, 20 games above 500, A-plus options, that might give the organization an option to maybe let go of a Jimenez, let go of a prized possession. Because there are a couple guys maybe that you think of. But by all accounts, what stinks is many people think that this is a rebuild and they're not going to be adding on to this team. It's just a slow, steady death in terms of rebuilding this squad. And so that's where I think the trouble comes for the Detroit Tigers. But, as spring training kind of evolves, we'll get a sense of what's going on, and we'll get a sense that what's this team going to look like and how they're going to gel together. Can they use a rallying cry to help the squad? Because if not, you could be looking at 2 organizations, the Red Wings and the Tigers, being massively in flux with new management, with new managers, and new general managers if it bottoms out. So there's going to be a lot of storylines. It's like one of those things where it's like the early shakings of an earthquake. It's just the tremors right now is the best way. The one word I would use is with the Red Wings and the Tigers is there's a lot of small tremors, and it could shake a lot more to open up the earth where everything gets swallowed in. So I hope the tremors stay like that and don't get too high. Let's just keep it at a level 1, because if we get to a level 10 earthquake and the ground starts shaking and opens up, you could have 2 new general managers, 2 new coaches, and a massive influx in the next couple of years.
Absolutely, you're right. The one thing that you can say about this team is over the course of the last couple seasons, they've done a decent enough job trying to infuse it with some young talent. That being said, is there any young prospects that you're kind of looking at this season? I know last year we were looking at Joe Jimenez to kind of come up. He was the relief pitcher. Last season, he in 53 2/3 innings, he gave up 26 hits with 78 strikeouts. So that's pretty solid right there. I know that he needs to work on command of some secondary pitches, but he could be a solidifying arm in that bullpen, perhaps. Also, Jacoby Jones came up. We've seen some flashes with him. He's a slightly above average outfielder, so he might be able to platoon in that center field position. He's shown power. He has the ability to hit major league pitchers, but he needs to find some more consistency at the plate to really sit there and carve out a niche on this team, I think. And there's a guy out there named Mike Gerber. He's a young outfielder. Word on the street is he's a very good all-round player. He's a left-handed bat, and you know how this team craves left-handed bats because we have none. He could be, a 4th or a 5th outfielder in that platoon situation for center field. So, there's a couple young guys out there who might be able to come up and, help solidify a few spots on this team. But I think at that point, you're really leaning really hard on some young guys to really come up and make an immediate impact. And that is saying a lot about a ball club, because when you're counting on these 22, 24-year-old kids to come up and really come in and sit there and really kind of take the bull by the horns and really help lead this team to either an AL Central division or sit there and come up and do some spectacular things to help this team compete for a playoff spot, that's great and all, but you just haven't done enough then in the offseason. And that's kind of where I think both of us are at headed into spring training right now. They just haven't done enough this offseason. If you're going to lean on kids like that, that's a bit of an issue.
You said it. We have to sit back and wait and see how this team is going to adjust to continuing to work under Brad Ausmus. You know they're going to work on improving their defense. You know they got to work on lessening the strikeouts. You got to work on improving that bullpen and getting more efficiency. The number one thing we all got to watch, though, is has Brad Ausmus learned how to manage a game? That is the biggest improvement, I think, across the board, maybe even more than health. Has Brad Ausmus learned that, hey, utilize the numbers, watch out for the bullpen, put people in the right positions, and stop with this whole maybe, attitude of like, hey, I'm the smartest guy in the room, and maybe go with a little bit more of a statistical feel and try your best to use analytics to help out this squad, because it seemed like the organization was emphasizing that as, hey, we're going to be an analytical type team. But when you saw some of the decisions that Ausmus made and you put it into the analytics meter, it spit out garbage. So we need to have it spit out like, okay, these are prime options that are statistically correct. So skepticism, tremors, great words to describe the Detroit Tigers. But a reason why I love, hopefully, live producing a podcast is just kind of asking is that I was able to reach out to Linda Cohn. I saw that she was landing in Detroit. I saw that she wanted to take in the Red Wings game, see the Joe Louis Arena for one last time. So I said, hey, you know me, kick the door down. That's my philosophy. I just wanted to reach out and ask. But she seems like a true pro. She's replied, and hopefully, get her on the phone line next. Linda Cohn will be on the Detroit Sports Podcast talking with the Doc just up next. On the phone line with us right now, ESPN SportsCenter Anchor, reporter, Sirius XM radio host, Linda Cohn now joins us here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thank you, Linda, for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Glad I could do it.
Now, what brings you here to the Motor City? I hear that you're in town.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, first of all, how did it take me this long to go visit the Joe in Hockeytown? It took me forever, but since they're closing the place down, I figured I better go soon. And I'm actually meeting my brother and some friends here. My brother's coming from a different origination. So we're just meeting here, doing some business, and going to a hockey game, which we love doing. And the really, sad part of it is the coincidence that my first game, here is the one that's going to be such an emotional night after the passing of Mike Ilitch. Like, it's going to be something people here that have gone to Red Wings games and season ticket holders are going to be remember forever and ever, because of how great this man was to not only the Red Wings, but to the Tigers, to youth hockey, and to the city.
Now, being a New York Ranger fan, how is it going for you for the New York Rangers?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll never change my fandom. When you grow up loving a team, while I am objective or attempt to be, I mean, I'm not going to hide my fandom when I'm on Twitter. People who follow me at Linda Cohn, they know it. But I actually think the Rangers seem to be in a good hit their stride right now. Henrik Lundqvist is playing like Henrik Lundqvist again, and it begins and ends there all the time when you're talking about the New York Rangers and their chances once again to try to win the Stanley Cup. And they're rolling 4 lines. They're pretty deep, and overall everyone's pretty healthy. Could this team compete for a Stanley Cup? Absolutely. Not sure if they can win it. And I wouldn't be surprised if GM Jeff Gorton has a thing or two up his sleeve come the trading deadline.
Now, from afar, Linda, you have realized that the Red Wings have been in the postseason now for the better part of 26 years. Mike Ilitch has passed away. But in looking at the Red Wing team, they are struggling a little bit, and many around town are kind of thinking that maybe this playoff streak is going to end.
Yeah, I can't believe it, right? I mean, I say I can't believe it. People who love the Red Wings, they can't believe it. And not only that, they're playing poorly. I mean, they're last in the Eastern Conference, and there are like 7 teams ahead of them just even to get a shot at the last wild card, which currently is held by Toronto. So I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I just don't see this team right now with the roster it has making an incredible run and 6 teams ahead of them being awful for them to, catch Toronto. It is really, all great things have to end, right? So I think this is the year just because they're going to run out of a season, and I think it's going to end.
So you landed in Detroit earlier Wednesday afternoon. What's on the itinerary?
You know what? Having a nice dinner, but honestly, and seeing a couple of things. Nothing, really exciting and thrilling. But, my main goal was going to see a hockey game and going to see an institution, an amazing venue. I know some people obviously say it has gotten very old and decrepit, and then I say, well, then that's why they're getting a new stadium, So, the time is now. But I had to see this place. I'm old enough where I was lucky enough to see the old Montreal Forum before the Bell Center was built, and I always wanted to see that. And I saw that when I was much younger, when I was a kid. And then, and we all saw, I grew up on Long Island, and the Nassau Coliseum became old and decrepit, and obviously the Islanders don't play there anymore. So the time was right for Detroit to get a new place, well-deserved, but I had to see the old place before they shut it down.
Linda Cohn on the line from ESPN. Now, are you potentially going to come back when the new district opens up? Many people are raving about the new Little Caesars Arena and what it's going to become.
Yeah, and I love it. And again, that's something, the Little Caesars Arena, that's all because of Mike Ilitch, right? I mean, he made that happen. One of the many things he made happen while he was alive. And I think it's great because in the coming years, you build an amazing arena like this, the NHL will look at this and say, hey, I like the way this is laid out. I like the way I can welcome a lot of people, masses of people to it. So it could be a spot, obviously, for an NHL All-Star game in the future. And that would be a really, really amazing thing for this town, right, for this city, to have something like that. And people come from far and wide to Detroit to see the new facility. And NHL All-Star is so much fun. So why wouldn't that happen in the next few years?
No, that'd be excellent. We'd love to have you. It's great to talk to you. Scouring the landscape across the NHL, who are the teams and squads that have impressed you so far this season?
You know what? It's obvious. I mean, when you look around the Metropolitan Division, is the division and the entire NHL that has blown people away. Obviously, who can count out the Pittsburgh Penguins as defending champs? And they're playing like they haven't missed a beat. The Washington Capitals, I know a lot of people who are Caps fans, and, every time I mention to them, I'm like, my goodness, I think you're better than last year, or I think they're better than the year before. They'll always say the same thing, and I will agree with them. Let's see it happen in the playoffs, and that's their big bugaboo. But I think right now the two best teams in the NHL are in the Metropolitan Division, in the Capitals and the Penguins. I like the way the Blackhawks are coming on of late in the West. Minnesota, I still have a problem with their ability to score. I still feel they're weak in that area, and if I was management of the Minnesota Wild, because defense and I got the goalie, I would make a trade and get a guy that can put the puck in the net and make a run.
How surprised were you at the move made by Montreal to change head coaches?
Yeah, that was huge. I wasn't surprised that Michel Therrien was fired because he had done several things along the way that were head-shaking. We remember, like, in mid-December, I believe it was, when he pulled Carey Price after, Price had, 4 goals on, 18 shots, but it wasn't all on him. Carey Price stared down Michel Therrien, and you don't want your best player on your team doing that. Then we remember before the season started, at a charity golf tournament, Michel Therrien was quoted as basically criticizing his captain, Max Pacioretty, basically calling him soft and not a good leader. Things like this. So I felt the writing was on the wall, and he might have been gone earlier, a year ago, if it wasn't because of the Carey Price injury. So what had me laughing was the fact when they hired Claude Julien again, and Claude Julien, I just heard a comment from him just saying that, he thought he was going to wait until the spring, the off season, to make a decision. He was going to have a few choices out there, but he wanted to get back to Montreal, and Marc Bergevin, GM of Montreal, basically laid it on the table and said it's now, maybe he didn't say it's now or never, but we would like to have you now. So Claude Julien didn't want to let that opportunity slip away. And it's truly funny, but people who don't follow hockey from other sports, they shake their head. They're like, how can this happen? They don't know that Montreal, even though they're in first place in the Atlantic Division, were inconsistent and could be a lot better. So they're like, how can a team in first place fire their coach? it happens in hockey, and people outside of hockey, they're still trying to figure that out.
Linda Cohn, kind enough to give us a few minutes. You can follow her on Twitter at Linda Cohn. Now, I'll get you out of here on this. Obviously, I'm a Red Wings fan. I've seen their success, 26 years in the postseason. Growing up watching SportsCenter, a staple in cable television, a staple for anybody that loves sports. What's been the secret to your success and longevity working at ESPN and at SportsCenter?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you using that amazing analogy of the Red Wings, and with me, I know. I mean, you know what? When I go and host SportsCenter, even to this day, after 24 and a half years and over 5,000 shows, honestly, I just make believe that someone out there is seeing me for the very first time, and I always have to bring my A game. And I never took anything for granted, and I just let my personality burst through, and I never tried to be something I wasn't. I just tried to be me, Linda, who just loves sports so much, just like the viewers at home who happen to still watch SportsCenter.
And what a personality. Linda Cohn, kind enough to give us a few minutes here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Enjoy your trip to Detroit. I hope for an opportunity to chat with you again. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I hope I bring good luck to the Red Wings for you.
Well, cuz, what do you think about that? Had an opportunity to talk to Linda Cohn, and very neat interview. I think that, when you get a chance to talk to a personality like that, obviously somebody that loves hockey, very interesting that she came to town to see the Red Wings game, and I'm very happy that we have an opportunity on this platform to just reach out and ask. I hope you're learning that, hey, with me going to the Palace, with me getting you on the air, just ask. And you saw the text I sent you. People, you get discouraged sometimes when people don't reply, but I think the high and the excitement when people do reply far outweighs when people ignore you. Man, what a great feeling! It's just cool, man. It's a nice project to be a part of. To have this go on with the project. Very good interview.
1 in every 10 say yes, and that's all you need is 1 in every 10.
That's right.
It's like going out there and trying to pick up chicks at the bar. 1 in every 10 will say yes, and that's all you need.
Great podcast, sir. Enjoy doing it with you each and every week. That's why we started this bad boy. Each and every Thursday, you can find the Detroit Sports Podcast. You can find Doc and Jock. All you need to do, support us free. Go to our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. We greatly appreciate it.
Go Wings.
This was locker room talk.
Second dick.
Sorry, Detroit. It didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head. They counsel me. They understand. They talk to me. They talk to me.